Hello and welcome to episode 20, where we're going to get into the tricky subject of preamps or interfaces. I say tricky because it's one of those areas that we work with where results are extremely subjective. With preamps, the two distinct camps that people tend to find themselves in are the first bunch, of which I have to admit I am a member, that believe that a preamp should only add one thing, and that's level. So you plug a microphone into it, the preamp's job is to amplify truthfully, add nothing, take nothing away, and present that output to something that your DAW can make sense. So the other group of people like to have a preamp that makes whatever they plug into it sound better. I've got no problem with that at all, because it's personal opinion. And there are some preamps who have got a name for themselves over the years for being extremely friendly to whatever is plugged into them. You'll hear people talk about, oh, if you use XYZ microphone and use the ABC preamp, it's a wonderful combination of the two bits of kit and the results will be outstanding. And those people sincerely believe that that's the case. I don't. I think that the preamps that are adding character or adding sort of flavour to the microphone that they're connected to are treatment. I mean, you can call it processing if you like, in my view. But I don't subscribe to that at all. So none of the preamps that I'm looking at today are these clever preamps that make things sound nicer. I'm looking at a range of preamps that just make things louder. And I decided that it would be fair to look at pretty horrible ones. I'll use this one as an example. I bought this as a get out of trouble preamp a few years back. It's got an XLR socket, and on the other end it's got a USB socket. You connect it up to your computer and you can plug any dynamic mic in you like. When I say any, of course I don't mean any, because it fails miserably on an SM7B because the output of the dynamic is so low that this thing really just can't do it justice at all. You have to add gain, and when you add gain it sounds pretty horrible. But it is an emergency type of thing. Unfortunately, it's also one of the sort of things that beginners might buy to try and do good quality recording. Use it, get very disappointed, and then sort of lose track and wonder what on earth's going on. But we'll give it a go. So that's at one end. What I had to do was decide which microphone to use. As I said, we can't use an SM7B because it needs phantom power to make a cloud lifter work. And without the cloud lifter, although it'll work into some of these preamps, it won't work into them all. We're also using this Lexicon Omega. It's a 2-channel preamp I bought a few years back. I stopped using it when I upgraded Windows and Windows no longer had a supported driver, so it was out. I've resurrected it for these projects. It actually worked quite well with AKG 414s. So when I was recording stereo things with that, one little box and the laptop, and it did a pretty good job. I'm not so certain it's got enough gain to cope with a cloud lifter free SM7B. The SM7B plugged into that means the gain control is running pretty hot. And so it becomes a little bit noisy. We're also going to listen to a Tascam rack mount unit. It's a 1641, and it works quite nicely for me here too. And for completeness, I've got a Zoom H6 sitting there, so we'll have a listen to the preamps in the Zoom H6. The only extra preamp that we're going to use is in a Midas M32 mixer that I've got sitting here. The Midas M32 versus the Behringer X32 are very similar in terms of the architecture of the actual mixer inside, but the Midas version has slightly nicer preamps if you read the blurb in the press. The X32 I always thought was quite nice, but apparently the M32 preamps are nicer. So we'll give that one a shot as well. What we're actually going to do for the test is use a Shure Beta 58. I figured that if we had a Beta 58 and we put it on our chin like this, I could do that as a constant on all of these preamps, and we could have a listen and see what the preamps sound like. You're now listening to me on the Beta 58 plugged directly into the Zoom H6. So we're just using the preamps in there, and it'll give you a good idea of how this mic responds with its P's and the B's and the sibilants. So we should get a pretty comprehensive handheld test with this microphone. It responds quite well to a range of voices, and I'm speaking in my normal voice as I do on all these videos. So that's giving us a comparison with the H6 and the Beta 58. Right, now we've got the Beta 58 plugged into the Lexicon. So the Lexicon is now running, and we've got level going on the screen here. So this is the Beta 58 going into the Lexicon Omega. The gain is actually quite high. We're about 3/4 round on the dial. Now, I think that might give us a little bit of a background noise. It's the sort of level where it would slightly concern me that the gain is going to be a teeny bit of a problem. But I'll leave a bit of silence. So that's the Beta 58 into the Lexicon Omega. Right, well, I've switched to the little cheap and cheerful interface. I've also had to shift to using Audacity. Cubase on my MacBook refused to accept the input. The Mac was quite happy talking to this interface, but Cubase didn't recognise it at all, which is a bit odd. I fired up Audacity and it's quite happy with it, which is a little bit strange. But in this case, it won't really matter, will it? So we've got the little cheap interface. We're using the Beta 58 microphone, and we're going through Audacity into my MacBook, so we can have a little bit of a comparison and see whether we think this interface is even worth talking about. I don't think it was much more than about £25, so it was quite cheap. And I guess my intention of buying it was to sort of get me out of trouble type product. So maybe that's worked, I don't know. But anyway, at the moment we're listening to the Beta 58 through Audacity on the little cheap and cheerful USB interface. And here's a little bit of silence. Right, so now we're on the Beta 58 plugged into the Tascam 1641, which is a rack mount unit, and it's got nice convenient XLRs on the front. This is why I like it. You can sit there in the rack, you can slap things into it quite quickly, get some levels up, and away you go. So it works actually rather nice. The 1641 is here in our video studio, and back in the audio studio we're using a PreSonus FirePod. Mainly because the computer there had got a Firewire input which was doing nothing, and I figured that as we got the PreSonus we may as well use that there and then bring the 1641 here. So that's the last bit of a test from the Tascam 1641 with the Beta 58, and here's a little bit of silence. So here we go with the M32 and the Beta 58. We're plugged into channel strip number 1. We're peaking at about -12 on there, so we're not stressing it at all. And we're recording on the internal recorder, which is a feature of these particular mixers. And it's going straight out onto that USB drive that's at the top, so we can just pull it out when we're finished, and away we go. Here's a little bit of silence if you want to judge the noise. So there we are. The M32 Midas with the Beta 58. There we go, a bit of a quick spin through preamps. For my money, I'm quite happy with the 1641. I'm actually quite happy with the Tascam H6 as well. Both of those seem to have a pretty similar neutral sound. I was happy with the Lexicon up until the point I started to use the SM7B, when it frankly ran out of steam. So that's been retired now. I don't use the Lexicon Omega for anything other than the bit of occasional stereo recording where I've got to be very limited with equipment, and I can take a MacBook and I can take that Lexicon, a couple of microphones, and I'm away. Other than that, it doesn't get much use now, but I'm pretty impressed. The little cheap interface, well, it is cheap and it does seem to work. And I do like the Tascam. The Tascam in the rack is still the one that I probably use all the time. So that's a quick run through of the interfaces that we've got here. As for the M32, I don't know. It's the mixer sits here, but it's a bit of a big beast to use just for its preamps. I'm not sure that I can hear the difference. Perhaps those of you who have really good systems at home and have got really tuned ears might hear something that lets them like it a little bit better. I've never used it with any of the posher microphones that I've got, so it tends to be used on stage, so it's very rarely got anything other than Beta 58s, SM58s, 57s and things like that plugged into it. So it may well be the best preamp, I don't know, but I don't use it for anything other than stage use, which is perhaps a bit of a shame, I guess. So there we've got preamps. Good, bad, indifferent, I don't know. Make your own mind up. If you fancy leaving a comment below, please do. I'll always read them. Click on the subscribe button if you haven't done already, and then you'll get notified when the next video comes out. So see you all soon. Take care.